So video 2 of the Olympic Games, we're looking at this in this video at a couple of things. One is the commercial element of the Games, particularly since 1984, where there was quite a significant change, and also how the Olympics can be used strategically by countries, particularly in terms of its influencing the people within that country, how they look to the world on the world stage, and how they might use an Olympics occasion as a political tool. So firstly, let's look at commercialism. So what does commercialism mean? Essentially, it's using sport or using the Olympic Games in this context as a business-related way in making profit. So it's basically about making money. Historically, the Olympics hasn't really been quite as money orientated as it might be now. It certainly had a massive amateurism drive, so professional athletes weren't allowed to take part. To be fair, there weren't that many professional athletes historically anyway. It's only more recently where professionalism within sport has been accepted and has been more the norm. In the past, one of the ways that the states has kind of gotten around this was to offer scholarships to their athletes, so they would support them financially to some degree within university structures to be able to train hard and hopefully do well for the country. The communist bloc, so the Eastern Europe, Germany, Russia, used to heavily fund their athletes. The government gave loads of money to their athletes for political reasons, because if they did well, it represented brilliantly on the communist countries. To illustrate really how sensitive the money factor was, or the professional element was, there was a Canadian athlete called Tom Longboat who was bought some shoes, and in effect he was barred from the Olympics and lost his amateur status because he had received indirect, I guess, money funding via being bought some shoes, which is incredible really, given what athletes now might receive. Because we didn't necessarily do this, we were very much a fair play. We didn't have the strategies perhaps the states or the communist blocs did have. We struggled to compete on the world stage. However, as time's moved on, professionalism has become much more the norm in sport, and now professional athletes can actually participate. So there's been a shift from amateurism to professionalism, although in the past other countries had ways of. So specifically now, let's look how commercialism really started. In 1976, Montreal, so Canada, hosted the Olympic Games, and to be honest, it was a financial disaster. Now, they lost millions and millions of dollars and nearly faced bankruptcy. So the city nearly faced bankruptcy after hosting the Games. Up to this point, it wasn't really a great thing to host the Games. It was a tough thing for the country. They often might lose money. Then in 1980, Moscow, so the Russians hosted the Games. However, this was a little different for them because they state funded the Games. So the government put loads and loads of money into the Games, because if the Games were successful, it would show the world how superpower the Russians were, how amazing they were, how great communism was. So this was almost a political strategy. They funded the Games to ensure that they looked good. Montreal was a disaster. Now, the LA Games was the most significant Games, because there's a guy called Peter Uberoth who was asked to, or employed to, by the IOC intervene, and he basically changed this way in which funding, or the financial side, the expense side of the Olympics was governed, and how you could basically generate money. He treated it much more like a business. He did a few things that we'll look at in a minute, which basically made it financially viable, as opposed to what Montreal experienced, and a bit of a disaster and a money loss. So he made it profitable. And you can see that the Los Angeles Games was very, very, very much associated with Coca-Cola. It was set in Atlanta, which is where Coca-Cola has a massive distribution or production centre. So 1976 was a disaster. Lots of financial loss. and LA changed things to make it profitable. Peter Uberoff, appointed by the IOC to make the games practical and possible financially. So what actually did he do? Now this image shows quite dramatically really how infused the games were and the place was with marketing and with sponsorship and with this financial input. So Coca-Cola stuff was absolutely everywhere. What did he do specifically? Well, he charged huge amounts of money for the TV and the radio rights. So in order to show or present the Olympics, companies, media companies had to put loads of money, pay loads of money. So this was an income. TV was becoming increasingly more popular. Obviously, it wasn't quite as prevalent as it is today. And more people were audiences, so were spectators or watched the telly or listened to the radio. So this meant that this was a very viable, attractive thing to sponsors. Now people could see more of the games. Then there was a greater advantage to the sponsors in terms of their advertising. And you can see how things have evolved since. In Sydney 2000, there were 16,000 journalists and 3.8 billion viewers. In 2004, 20,000 journalists and 4 billion viewers. And I couldn't tell you what 2012 was or 2014 Sochi, but obviously it's incredibly immense. So Peter Uberoff also, apart from the TV and radio rights, he persuaded large companies to build facilities and to sponsor and invest in the games in order to be able to have the Olympic logo on their products and to advertise. So this could be a little bit contentious. It's possible maybe it's gone too far, but it certainly contributed to an income for the host nations and avoided, in most cases, them being in debt. So this is a key thing as well that Uberoff introduced, the Olympic Partner Program, the top program, the Olympic Partner. Basically, this meant companies could apply for becoming one of the Olympic official sponsors or suppliers or licensees. So not anybody can have the Olympic logo here on their product. They have to essentially have bought into that by giving the money into this top program. So again, this symbolises the huge income that the host nation and the IOC have from producing or putting on the Olympic Games. And obviously big companies like Coca-Cola, like Adidas, etc. will want to have a slice of the advertising pie in terms of the Olympics. And here you can see some huge companies who were the 2012 sponsors. Was it good or a bad thing? Well, there are some positives. So undoubtedly improvement in facilities. Sponsors contributed lots of money into the sports. Commercialism actually saved the games when you look at the disaster of Montreal 76. The media share all these really positive experiences and accomplishments worldwide. It allows it to continue and to be viable for host nations. Now they're desperate to host the Olympics, as opposed to previously when it was a burden. And of course, the host nation themselves gain a lot of money, facilities, and work opportunities for the people. However, questionably, it's overly commercial now. It's too much about the stuff, the merchandising and the advertising. Maybe some of the sponsors shouldn't be Cadbury's or McDonald's or Heineken. Maybe it's too much about profit and too much like a business. And actually, does it still illustrate the ideals that de Coubertin have and wanting this Olympic ideal of fair play and about taking part? So then lastly here, we're going to look at the Olympics as a vehicle for nation building. So what is nation building? It basically means a country trying to promote itself, trying to generate national pride, to increase their status, often equating how well you do in the sporting environment with how politically successful you are. So it puts you on the world map. And this could either be as the host nation, so Beijing or Britain, or it could be a country that in the Olympics does particularly well. So the Ethiopian endurance athletes really nation build in terms of their performances. There's another term called showcasing, which you need to know. And this basically is the idea that the host nation shows off their country and uses the sports arena to present themselves on this world stage. So the whole world can see you, and while you're hosting the games, you are showing how amazing you are at the sport, which then will reflect on your political status. Thirdly, a key term is called the shop window effect. Now, this relates to the people inside the host country and how they feel about themselves. Now, they look out, they are hosting this nation, there's a real drum up of motivation and drive and nationalism, and you feel proud, you feel good, and a key word is you feel appeased. So we in Britain in 2012, certainly there was a buzz about, everybody was very spirited, and that's called the shop window effect. So we're all behind the athletes, we're desperate to show our country and feel proud about our country. Historically, some of the Eastern Bloc communist countries claimed that they were driven in the Olympics and hosting the Olympics and being good at the Olympics for health benefits. However, the reality of it is that they just literally wanted to show off their political world, how particularly something like communism was good. So there were very false claims about it being for the health of the nation and for these positive reasons, when actually it was a political tool. Sport is a political tool. And if we look at Beijing, for example, the opening ceremony, some of the fireworks were false. They were basically computerized. This is them trying to showcase their country in a very false way. This little girl had a beautiful voice and sang a song in the ceremony. This is the face of the girl who lip-synced the singing because this girl was considered not pretty enough. And obviously there are some military factors and political factors within China that they didn't want us to see when we were looking in at them. So China wanted us to see this prosperous, positive, developing country, that communism was really positive. However, the government hugely controlled what happened. They controlled the money and the workforce and the morale. And Beijing actually, in a way, was a way of bringing out China on the world stage. It's almost like a coming out party, showing them how successful and powerful they were. Reinforcing and reintroducing communism and showing this, the international society what a positive thing they were. But this isn't necessarily the truth. Beijing has did terrible things in terms of preparing for the Olympics. They basically, I'll pause the video and have a look at this, they basically booted out a lot of people from their homes with no payment in order to build the facilities. They showcased, of course, here being top of the table. They obviously did incredibly well, presenting themselves as a good thing, the grand ceremonies, the size and the scale of the ceremonies and their success. However, they have terrible human rights association with the Tibetans. Obviously, the things that I've mentioned already, they're not really showing them in the best way they want to be. There have been times when countries have boycotted the Olympics. Country that went to the Berlin Olympics in '36 basically was endorsing and saying that it was okay for Hitler and the Germans to treat the Jews as they did. Beijing, as I've mentioned, there were terrible human rights issues. Munich Olympics in '36, several Israeli athletes were killed by terrorists. So again, this has really moved away from the original philosophy of Pierre de Coubertin, who wanted it to bring countries together. So the politics can clearly be used for internal or external politics. And Sochi, just in 2014, obviously very anti-gay, and this has been publicised in the world's media, not made them show particularly positively, even though they pumped an extortionate amount of money into hosting the Winter Olympics. They intended to show a very positive image, but might not have done given the political agenda there. So a quick sort of overview. Do pause the video and have a look at all the different potential political elements of the Olympic Games over the years. But things can be made positive. So South Africa, after the apartheid politics kind of moved on, certainly initially, were welcomed back to the Games after 30 years of being banned for their human rights issues. And Germany competed again in Barcelona '92. So politics are rife in sport, whether we wish them to be or not, often equating sporting success with political success, and you can have a look at these factors here.